Hello, welcome to another MarketMuse content strategy webinar in our series. Today's discussion is about how to hijack demand with content differentiation. I'm our co-founder and chief strategy officer, Jeff Coyle. I am going to introduce our amazing guest. Dustin Robertson is a partner at DRMG, and they are a SaaS positioning, differentiation, category creation focused firm. And that's what he's been focused on for a number of years. They've created more than a dozen categories that they focus on with their clients. And it's just amazing to have him on the discussion where we're going to get into buyer journey, differentiated category creation, and just how to position a brand. There's so much noise in the world today, whether it's because of AI or because of the fact there's just a lot of noise in the world. And Dustin Robertson really gets into it. So thanks for joining us, Dustin. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to DRMG and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's a long journey of starting on the internet in the 90s. So I just have kind of grown up digitally, and I was a marketer. And so I learned how to make brands that didn't exist in the physical world. And so you had to really connect with people to the point where they would basically tell and sell your story for you. So I did that in B2C with a brand called backcountry.com. So we built that from scratch, and it's, I think, $1 billion business now. People have tattooed that logo on their arms, and so we were able to use that logo, the goat, to represent who people wanted to be. We built all our own software building that business. This was in the early 2000s. There was no SaaS, and so we kind of got really good at software. After 13 years of that, I realized I should have been selling and building software the whole time. I would have made a lot more money. And so I moved over. And so I've been doing SaaS ever since. And we just started running the playbook we ran there, where we would come up with messaging and positioning that aligned to the outcomes that people wanted for the software we were building. And that turned out to be a kind of unique approach. And a book in 2016 came out called Play Bigger that kind of encapsulated what we were doing. And so if you guys want to kind of get an overview of what differentiated positioning looks like, Play Bigger has a framework for it. That's their approach. You don't have to follow that, but yeah, we kind of productize that. We call ours SaaS brand strategy, and we use an approach called RISE: research, insights, story, and execution, to bring these categories to life. So yeah, there's lots of myths and misconceptions around it, and you don't have to go through a 24-week process to do this. We can give you some hacks.
That's what we're going to do today. I'm pumped about it. Whether we're talking about the RISE framework and I actually just got a DM, backcountry is what he had stated. Yeah, the SaaS brand strategy show also is your podcast. So please go check that out, and we'll highlight all these things in the show notes and at the tail end of the discussion as well. So just to get into kind of the starting point, and when you're thinking about, for anyone that's not aware of it, how do you think about new category creation? Like, what is new category creation, the basics, and how do you know whether you need to do this? What are the triggers that typically jump into that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty intimidating to say you're going to create a new category. I think you immediately think, wow, that's going to cost a lot of money. How are people going to know about it? Where am I going to get leads? And the reality is we're all pretty much in an existing category. And so what we do for our clients is we come up with a point of view that they can have on the problem they solve. And that is, if you nail the words, that's the outcome your customers want. And then they will use those words to tell and sell for you. That's what category creation looks like today. We could go through an example if that's confusing, because there are some really high profile examples out there of this happening.
No, definitely. Let's get into some specifics. As someone who kind of I'm continuously just defining a new category and then deciding whether we want to get into it. And then, we'll get into some kind of category confusion. How do you know if there's some confusion in the category too? But yeah, give us some examples of new category creation.
Yeah, so a really prominent one. So I'm based here in Utah, so I kind of have the inside story on it, but Qualtrics. So you can come out and do comparative marketing. Lots of companies have done it and been wildly successful. So Qualtrics, they were a survey platform. They were built by statistics professors, and they were competing against SurveyMonkey. So they just strictly compared themselves to SurveyMonkey and said they were the enterprise version. And an enterprise wouldn't want to use something with a monkey in its name and use some very basic positioning against them. And they got to 100 million in recurring revenue with that comparative messaging. So it can work in the right place, right time. And there's another example of a current company that's totally dominating the market that's done comparative advertising. But they realized that there was opportunity to sell even bigger ARR contracts and grow quicker. And so they decided to do this definition of like, what are people measuring? Like, what is this outcome people want? And they figured out it was an experience. Everybody was measuring some type of experience: customer, employee, product. It was an experience. And they said, okay, well, let's not sell surveys. Let's sell an experience management platform to the Fortune 1000. And what happened was their ARRs almost tripled. They were selling $1 million contracts now, and the customers could tell and sell the story for them. You go to the CFO with a $1 million survey contract, he's going to say that sounds expensive. You go to him with a $1 million customer experience platform, he's going to ask, don't we already have one? And that is the key differentiation and why this work is so powerful, to have your customers tell and sell the story for you. So Qualtrics is kind of my favorite example.
I love the people have prejudice towards particular words. They often can connect those words with something that they see as the unit cost is inexpensive. In my historical life, one of those examples is leads. People have this perceived notion of how much leads cost, and they want them to cost less, right? But intent data, or intent signals, or buyer behavior, right? You get into a different caliber of kind of a nuance. So you're looking at customer experience. Well, surveys are things that are on clipboards, and they kind of seem like they should cost $1, right? Or $2 or $5. But that customer experience is so much different. You mentioned comparative positioning as their like phase one, right? So when do you know to jump from comparative against the top market share provider to adding on? Maybe you're not having to add on features, but you're repositioning. And I love the way that you described the repositioning of Qualtrics to not only be the words, but the audience. Is it always an audience plus message?
No. Like, if the first thing you'll notice is you're just having really trouble getting any pricing power, and it's if you're comparing yourself to somebody, the conversation is really going to get down to like price quickly. Whereas if you're coming out with a differentiated point of view, they're trying to understand this different space you're playing in and how they're going to get that outcome. And price is much less part of the process. So you'll have no pricing power. The sales team will be getting to pricing discussions very quickly, which they may enjoy because it means they're going to close a deal. But it's very difficult to grow the business that way. So I think that's the first red flag.
Nothing's worse than early pricing discussions. I mean,
totally.
It's that's the signal that you completely whiffed on that match of value, and you're being compared to another, which leaves yourself open to being misjudged or prejudged, right, for something that you're not, or your unique differentiated value is immediately diminished when you're just selling octane 89 gas, and there's 14 gas stations up the road that I can just look at the prices on and make my decision, right? Even though it's extra pure, it's still 89 octane gas. So when you're thinking about the decision, going through that decision making process, are people coming to you having already made the decision that they're either going to go into the saturated bloodbath that is a industry mature product, and they're going to just fight to the death on price until everything's free? Or how do you make that decision to strike into differentiation, or then the next layer of a new category creation? Because it can be a big investment. It can also be a relatively small investment.
Yeah, and it's going to be different for everybody. Qualtrics was super unique because they were a large SaaS company when they decided to do it. We work with tons of startups, so they'll have product market fit. They will not have message market fit. And so a sign you have product market fit, but you don't have message market fit is you're just touting, the save time, save money, the very obvious, well, if I do this, I don't have to do this anymore. And that type of outcome is also a comparison. And somebody else can always save you more time or money. And people don't actually buy time or money savings. They want to buy some superpower that they're going to get from using it. Yes, save time and money is probably something that happens from it, but it's not why they buy it. So, yeah, would say that is another indication that you might want to get message market fit when you have product market fit. If you don't have product market fit, so I've also done this. You don't have product market fit, but you build really great messaging. That works too, but then the sales team gets very frustrated as they sell in and the customers aren't happy.
Well, that happens. I mean, it happens with, product complexity. It can happen with, product market fit. Let's talk about that first one though, because I think that most people fit more along in that line. And what would be some other signals? Would a signal when someone says, well, in SaaS, right, you're competing with the status quo or manual labor, is that kind of a signal of that? Or are there some other signals?
No, it's like, so for example, and we're having lots of things automated right now, and that's been a trend, right? So it's like, oh, you don't have to do this, you don't have to move your leads anymore, or the intent signals are now automatically uploaded to Salesforce, and your leads are sorted by this highest probability. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, that's what it does, but what's the outcome from that? Oh, the outcome is I don't have to send 45 emails a day to people that aren't going to respond. My team can work on the ones that are actually going to want to have conversations. And then we're having, higher satisfaction from the sales team. The customers are more eager to talk to us, right? There's an outcome that you could craft a story around that it has nothing to do with the automation of moving the leads through Salesforce.
So I love product messaging, product management. It's like my whole life, right? So is it just walking the story all the way to completion? Is that how you advocate going through it? So I want to get into the RISE framework as well, and detail your perspective on it. But I know a lot of folks get stuck here, where I have a lead management platform, right? I own or a lead nurturing platform, or a lead qualification framework, or something like that. Is it just walking that far enough down that road within the business until it goes to like make money, and then you step a few steps back and try to figure out, is there something there? Is there a pony in that, one step before obviously everything gets into more money, more valuation?
Yeah, totally. It's basically peeling back the onion until you're like, what is actually going on here? And then what is that higher level outcome that people would actually want from it? Maybe it's not happening. But yeah, measuring experiences, they're just like, well, that's what everybody's doing. Wait, can we be an experience management platform? We have one of our clients, it's mosaic.tech. Very odd URL. We didn't name them, but right. they work in finance, and so they essentially built a BI system that was specific for the finance team, and it kind of hooks into all of the P&L and the finance tools, but also hooks into all of the tools we use that generate reports live all the time. And in finance, people want finance to not be a compliance organization. They want it to be much more, especially if you have invested in a team. And if you had financial planning and analysis, that was generally a good thing. That meant, I actually have people that aren't just doing compliance and control work. And what we were able to come up with for them was there's actually another outcome that they want more than FP&A. They want to be strategic. And there was all these blockers. And so part of this, making this story arc, is, can you take people from the old way to the new way, like a from to? And so we were able to take people from this old world where financial planning and analysis could kind of look at the past and then make some indication about the future, but it was a very cumbersome process, where a strategic finance professional could do it in real time. And we told that story arc. And that is an example of using the outcome that your customers want and nailing the words and then the customers instantly start using those words. So when we did that category in 2020, I think there was 500 instances of strategic finance in people's LinkedIn profiles. And last time I looked, there was 7,000 people using those terms in their profiles. So it's like really, and that's the example of you got to circle the wagons and get like, what are they actually trying to do? Well, they want access to all the data. They want to be able to plan and do analysis for the business. But what do they actually want? Oh, they want to be a strategic member of the team. And so,
yeah. So what do you do? What do you do when you create the category and then maybe another person hops into that category who shouldn't be in the pool? You know, they're actually doing it a different way, or maybe they're kind of have some sort of additional category, a category adjacent item. Maybe that it's like an alternate term, or they're creating a category at the same time. How do you manage through those types of situations where someone's saying that they are this and you're saying you are this and your definitions aren't the same?
Yeah, usually when you do this work and you come up with this differentiated point of view, people are not going to run and jump into the category with you. Right. With strategic finance, it fits so perfectly that they had multiple people jump into the category with them, and they were a seed stage company. So this was a little unnerving because it's not like
that was my example. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah. And so they didn't have like Anaplan or any of the behemoths jump in, right? Because they're not, the giants aren't going to do that, but they had a bunch of other startups jump in with them. And so it was just really important that they had to start to do some of the large category ownership activities, like starting the top 50 strategic finance professionals awards. They had to do that like the first year. They did the podcast, and they've raised $100 million or maybe $70 million now, but they've raised a bunch of money. They're well on their way. This is, almost 4 years later now. So they're doing quite well. And so now they're going to have the strategic finance conference. And so they're just owning all of the things a category leader would own. And they got on it really quickly. So that's what you have to do if you create and this was probably the closest to like a brand new category. There wasn't really something there before. And the need, time is right. And there's a bunch of other people jumping in it. So you do have to go into those. Okay, what does a category leader do? Well, we actually nurture this category and we bring the community together around it. Generally, you do not have to do that right away. And you can just come up with a different point of view and get really unique about the problem you solve and start to like work that into the sales messaging and into the go-to-market. And you can have some wins there. You don't have to. We've kind of been talking about a pretty big category projects here, so I don't want to intimidate anybody.
Right. Getting into kind of, let's just talk about somebody who's in their category and they're not going anywhere, right? They're in it. They believe that this is the right one. And what's their kind of 100-point oil check car service of their messaging to see if they're thinking about the right things with regard to differentiation? Like how do you go from start to finish to like quick steps for analyzing a current brand who's in a category and they're not going anywhere?
Yeah, so I would first just work through all the marketing and all the pitches. How often are we being comparative? So, and it's fine if you're comparing yourself to the old way and you're doing the new way, but then are we articulating that from to journey and the outcomes that come with it, or are we just comparing to the old way? So that's like the first check. Roll through and just see how much comparison are we doing. And try.
Can you rephrase that last part? Just, I think there's a nuance there. So like, what's the difference between A and B? Old way, new way, right? What's that? Describe that other thing and why it's more important and more valid.
The from to on the old way, new way.
From to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
there, you'd only know if you were in this biz. So,
yeah. Because you could confuse that with being comparative, but the new way is tied to this outcome that they're going to receive from abandoning the old way. And it's not save time, it's not save money, right? It's something else that you figured out from diving into your ICP and knowing what your customers want. So just, it's very easy to say, oh, old way, you had to spend time doing this, new way. So it could just be like a save time, save money exercise. That's not what you're looking for when you're going through the from to journey.
So that dream, that aspirational state, that transformation, the revelation, the, everything's perfect now because of this? Like, is that what you're hunting for in this analysis?
Yeah, there's an outcome that they're seeking. It's not about the product. So go through, find where you're comparing yourself, then be like, okay, are we now just talking about us and the product? Because it's not about us or the product. Nobody wants to buy software. Nobody wants to install new software. Nobody wants to learn how to use new software. So you're asking them to do this. So there needs to be a big outcome for them in it. And so as you go through the comparison, then you got to peel back and say, okay, now are we just talking about the product? Can we actually talk about the outcome for the customer?
So the trap on outcome for the customer frequently in these exercises is quant. The quant in the room says, what's the KPI we're influencing, and does it go higher than it does with other software? How do you get around that that quantification, I'll say, trap? Oftentimes people use it as a crutch in that part of a messaging process or a project. Do you lean into it? Do you stuff it down into the trap door and say, don't worry about that now? What do you do with the tendency for the integrators in the room to want to go quant?
Yeah, no, I mean, and so our last podcast episode was about we called it the cake conundrum. And it's basically that question of like, prove it. How do you know this is going to work? Prove it. We get asked that.
By the way, I haven't, just honestly, I have not listened to that podcast. So I love that I'm just like, we woven into the fabric of what's going on today. Cause I see it so many times. It's like the crutch of just like they think they can stick a thumb in this dreamy fairy tale vision of your world of aspirational modeling with show me the data. So what do you do?
So we do have metrics. I mean, because ultimately the only reason you're doing this is to accelerate pipeline velocity and increase ARR for our clients. So we absolutely set those measurements up pre and post. We have launch measurements to know, is the category resonating? So like strategic finance, we had a hunch like this is probably gonna become a job title. Let's look on LinkedIn and just measure it.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, cool. It's not really, like, a few people use it, but it wasn't really a job title. And then it was just a year later, there was the VP of strategic finance for positions being posted and it was being used. So you want to set those metrics up for that. But if you're just messing around with some messaging and positioning, you should definitely set up a metric for that quant in the room and for yourself, honestly. If you can measure it, you should. So one example of like, okay, we're comparing ourselves here. I'm going to come up with a way to question somebody's reality. And that's another way to do from too, right? It's like question the reality. Like, are you still running your business on an email service provider? That was one we used back in the day because everybody was, and they're like, wait, am I not supposed to? And so you can just go measure you're buying ads. You can go measure the click-through rate and then the sign-up rate and then track those people through the pipe. And ideally, once they're in the pipe and sales is having a meeting, they're able to carry on that point of view of like, yeah, no, ESPs are not how you want to be doing this anymore because here's all the complexity. And you kind of show them the new way. And so you could track it all the way through and be like, okay, yeah, we are getting better pipeline velocity. They're moving to the next meeting quicker. And then we actually are closing higher AR deals. That whole pipeline, to have the definitive results is usually a year, but you can get data as you go. So it's stupid. Don't be the guy in the room that asks, prove it, or how are we going to measure this? But do be the smart woman in the room who has the plan and ready to go.
That's the best advice anyone's ever given on a discussion about this topic. Don't be that person. But it's not because it's not important. It's just you don't want that. You want to be backing that up with a reason for it. So tracking back to that, and by the way, really, really insightful stuff about ways to think about positioning. How does this apply for maybe other types of businesses? And then how would this differ for, say, a product-led growth offering of different shapes and sizes? So, not so much the work days of the world, but maybe, a product-led growth offering that has a trial or a free offering. Or an offering for use a user-based offering that then only then scales over time.
Yeah, we also have a pod episode on PLG, so
your podcast is everything. Yeah.
Well, we did like 30 episodes, and we just kind of like unpacked all these areas where these questions come up all the time.
Right.
So having a differentiated point of view that is aligned to the outcome your customers want, that is table stakes. No matter if you have self-serve, inbound, outbound, all of them, it is a requirement. So it's only going to accelerate a PLG, which is really just code name for we have a self-serve funnel, and inside that funnel, it is the UI and the wow moments are really articulated to get somebody to move to the next level and sign up, or the product is really architected to have other people sign up once you join, a la Slack. So PLG is a little bit of a, I feel like, misused buzzword. It's totally a valid strategy that everybody should understand and implement into their business models, not just PLG companies.
I'll back that buzzword up then. So how is it misused? Are you saying it's misused because it's used as a synonym for other things, or is it misused for stuff you should be doing anyway?
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're PLG and you're not. And so I've never found a company who said, well, we're not because we don't know when the wow moments happen in our product. We don't have a way to have our clients share those with other people, which a lot of people don't. So that's fair, but they're not, like, nobody consciously doesn't have those things. And so I just think being PLG or not is not the right way to talk about it. Like, we all need to have a PLG mindset in our onboarding and the interactions our customers have with their product.
Right. So the fact that the user can't find those things on their own, and you have to escort them to those moments, is the only real difference in the two. And are you saying that everyone should be focused on those things? It doesn't matter what types of products they're offering.
Totally. I mean, like, so Salesforce, right, to stand up Salesforce and get value, it generally requires like an integrator, and like, so they are definitely not PLG, right? And so, right. But like 2005 called and wants their software back. Like, if you're launching now, you need to have a onboarding flow that is self-serve, that is guided, that knows these wow moments are going to happen, and then registers that for what, either it's like customer service to follow up, or you send an automation recognition to be like, oh, you just tagged your first da-da in the product. We're so happy, That's just, yes. I mean, this is not rocket science or breakthrough strategy. But it has been, somebody made a new category out of this stuff and called it PLG, and it got traction. So.
Hey, nothing's better than making it a milestone that you're validating the aha moment, right? And that's that's the framework. Salesforce did that well, even though, like you mentioned, it was a behemoth. It was Salesforce.com. When you did hit those milestones, they made sure you knew it, or early on, and so they got the same concepts, even though the software is not, you're not getting up and running. They did have the closing the feedback loop of those aha moments, but not like through a self-serve mechanism, correct? So that there's a big nuance there, but the fundamentals are true. So I think that's awesome advice for everybody. So like, this information is going to be relevant to you, no matter what kind of business you're running. How would this work if someone is in a, should they be thinking about this? If maybe they have a B2C brand, or if they have a, e-commerce heavy, or an agency, or are these things still appropriate, or are there applications?
Yeah, totally. So I have a D2C brand. We sell reading glasses, and you would think people come to us because they have a magnification problem, but they can solve their magnification problem 1,000 different ways. People come to us because we have a brand POV that aligns with something that they think is cool. So we only celebrate people that are old. So you have to be 43 to need reading glasses. So our brand is 100% about aging awesome and being proud that we're old. I'll get you a discount code after. None of. So Yeah, so nobody. So we only market to people over 43. We have a message that celebrates aging awesome. That's our point of view, and it's very much kind of anti-conformist. Old people. None of us want to be 30 again. So as an example, that's how we're different. That's how we don't compare ourselves to the other reading options. And these things are $130, so they're pretty expensive for the category they're in. So that's an example. So you always need to like figure out your niche. And the other thing you can do,
yeah.
And then the other trick on the internet is anytime you can like pick a demographic characteristic you can target off of, it makes it a lot easier. So people in an age bracket and an income bracket, you know, we follow you around on Instagram pretty good. So focus is the other tip. If you're going after a market, like focus in on a part of that, and you'll get closer to being able to have a message that aligns with that target, as opposed to targeting everybody.
So creating the customer journey, understanding the customer journey, obviously you got to be willing to niche down. You got to be willing to pick a lane with at least one chunk or campaign strategy. That's going to be where this stuff resonates. So by differentiation, differentiating for a target category, all relevant, whether you're selling a pair of socks, a pair of glasses, or a B2B software company. So I want to get a little bit more of like how it's done. So you want to walk through the RISE framework? You tipped it a few times, and it's the basics. Sure. But I thought that it would be cool to just get into that, and then how you might extract, I'll say, messaging pillars or concepts we want to own out of that process.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So RISE, yeah, it starts, they're acronyms. So we crafted our own framework, and it starts with research. So that's the first thing. Everybody can do this, and everybody probably has research in their company. And so we do research with the stakeholders of the business. So whether that's investors, founders, CEOs, executives. But then we spend most of the time doing the research with the customers. So for us, we find we need to talk to about 10. So you don't have to talk to 100. We talk to 10 customers. And we really don't talk about the product or the software for the client we're working for. We talk to them about what they do, how their job goes, like what their world's like, and really what they're seeking to have removed out of their life or improved. And so if you approach the conversation that way, as opposed to like, oh, you use our software, what do you think of it? What would you like us to improve? That's kind of the where the Henry Ford quote comes in. If you asked them what they wanted, they would want a faster horse. So when you do these interviews, you got to be very careful to approach it in a way that you're not getting the faster horse answer, and that you're really peeling back the onion to be like, oh, everybody really wants to just have a bigger impact on their business, and they're in this, they're in this department. What is that bigger impact? And so you'll get all of these insights back after the research, and then you can move to the next stage of RISE, which is insights. And so at that point, we're taking all of the research we did, we're kind of compiling a customer insights report. And in there, you will start to get themes. And this is where you can use some AI, because you can now take the transcripts from these 10 customer interviews, you can get them summarized, and then you can actually get the AI to start to pull out the insights for you. And you can get them too, you'll just go through and see them. But it's actually a way you can start to use ChatGPT to help you get to an insight or something you might not have noticed quicker. And now you have the insights, like, okay, we got to craft this into a story. And so that's the S in RISE. And so we use this framework, and this is from, you guys have seen the Andy Raskin best sales deck in the world. So like, what's the big change in the world? And then we've spent a ton of time on the problem statement. Like, what is the problem you're solving? Because again, if you're focused on the product, the problem you solve is going to be very much tied to the product, where you want that problem to be up here in that life-changing improvement stuff that you got from the customer insights report. Once you have the problem and the big change in the world, then you can start to really architect the story. And we usually deliver like a manifesto about the problem. So this is a 200-word document that kind of rallies the company around the problem they're solving. And then at that point, a category name usually arises. So we're going to name the category. And then we go to the E stage, which is execute. So you roll the category out to the company, give everybody the tools how to talk about it. And then you got to build it into the go-to-market, which is no small feat depending on what size company you are. We just got done doing it for a $300 million company, and it's been, I think we're on our 10th month of execution in the go-to-market there, but they have a massive sales org. So.
I think, I mean, you mentioned, and by the way, you mentioned the best sales deck I've ever seen, or a lot of it drives back to storytelling, and you've mentioned a few times that, and I think that if you can't if you can't take whatever it is you're saying and turn it into, and make it not fun, turn it into the spine of the story, you've got work to do. And I think that harkens back to the Jeff, the two things that you mentioned. And so I think you made the framework with Rise. I think, dissecting, it can be tough, it can be not fun, but dissecting that deck, dissecting the approach, diagramming your sentences, also, just to see if you can get it into that format, or talk to somebody like you who can drive it back and go, hey, you're missing this big spot. Because if you're not eloquently communicating the big change that's going to happen, right? It's not just big smoke and mirrors. It's not smoke and mirrors. You have to eloquently communicate that today you publish 100 articles and only 2 of them work. I need to make that 10 out of 100 at least to impact and change all of the subsequent things that happen, to make it so that your content team trusts you, so that the SEO team can function, so that the whole website can double or triple in its traffic, so that can change your business, right? It all starts with you picking the right winners for what content to create and what content to update. If you pick the wrong winners, the wrong things for them to build, none of that other magic can happen. So it's going from that mistake you're making that you might not even know, or the reality in the world you might not even know, right? And then telling the story of how you get to this beautiful place. And I think a lot of folks' decks start with, we're a lead nurturing company, or something like that. So how do you morph somebody? By the way, we're going to get into the specific tactic you talked about with transcription analysis with ChatGPT. I put a pin there. I want to go back to it. We're going to do a deep dive there. I got a DM immediately that says, talk to him about translations, about transcriptions. Because if you know the audience that listens to this, we talk a lot about repurposing, we talk a lot about transcription optimization, rich media optimization, and there's a pony there to talk about. But tell me about how to diagram a sentence effectively. Are you analyzing existing decks? How do you turn an anecdote into a story, as it were?
Yeah, and honestly, I have partners that are very skilled at this. But the general rule is, first off, less is more. Second off, go higher up than you think. So in that example you just gave, hey, you're working on the content that doesn't have an impact. Okay, well, let's go up higher. You spend a bunch of time and money building this content team. These are brilliant writers, and you're wasting their days on stuff that doesn't matter. Nobody's going to want to work there. Nobody's going to be part of that org. So we want to have the best content in the world and the best writers. We need to have them working on things that matter, and that's the problem we solve. And then that all trickles down, right?
Go a layer up. You always go a layer up and a layer down. It goes really good with topic analysis, because you may own your category, but what's the category one above? Yeah. What's the category one below? Why are people researching? You got to do all of that hard work. So I love that description.
Yeah. So those are kind of like the two baselines. And then, I mean, this audience is writers. You guys know how to write, but like write from attack mode, make sure all the words are carrying their weight, because there should only be, 10 or 12 of them in the problem statement, for example, or the big change in the world. So it's really important that that last podcast we just did, he also talked about monogamous words that don't cheat. So make sure you're not using words that cheat. And he's like, in the space we work in, which is strategy, he's like, we use all sorts of words that cheat, And so I was like, oh, that's a really good one. So yeah, check for your only monogamous words.
That's awesome. That's such a great vocabulary word. as well. Words that cheat, words that express, yeah. Also, words that feign doubt. So by saying something doubtful, you actually cover your ass with that, and that's also a form of what is being exhibited there. So I love that. Really cool. So let's talk about using AI to fast track these processes. One of my favorite recent actions is building, using MarketMuse to understand where I have gaps in a particular cluster of my site or my client's site, and then looking at pages at the cluster level and saying, all right, well, does this transcript or does this, long form article, how would I improve it? How would I get to the point where it does cover this, or it, extracting concepts that illustrate that, almost like I have notes for myself for stuff I need to do to improve this.
Yeah.
That's effectively what you're talking about. You're looking at a call transcript and not just summarizing it, potentially, finding similarities, things like that.
Yeah. So, and this space is, as everybody knows, it's changing on the daily. So like what we talk about may be, ups, or there may be a better way to do it on Tuesday. So it's a little crazy to have kept up with it. But like the loop we're in right now is asking the AI to give us feedback on the questions we have. So let's just use like a press release, for example, something boring nobody wants to write. So you can give it all the info that you want in the press release and tell it to write a press release. Like, okay. And then you can ask it, you say, hey, if I was a editor at Fast Company, what feedback would I have on this press release? And it goes, oh, well, it'd be this. You're like, okay, rewrite it with that feedback. And then you can have it come back down again and ask it again. You're like, okay, well, what if I wanted to publish this in the Wall Street Journal? What feedback would a Wall Street Journal editor have? You're like, okay, rewrite it on that. And you can kind of go through this cycle. We did this as an exercise. It's about 30 prompts. And the last prompt is, okay, now give me the names of the 5 reporters who would be most likely to publish this article. And it did that. So that's kind of the trick is it will just continue to work on with its own recommendations. And so as long as you're prompting it the right way, you will continually get better results. So with the customer transcripts, it's the same thing. We're going to be like, oh, what do you think the theme of this conversation was? You're like, okay, well, what if we want to know what it had to do with their job? And we'll put that in there. And then we can be like, okay, well, what do you think this has to do with their job and their life? Is there an outcome that could be connected here? And just kind of the same thing. We're going to continually prompt it and then have it go back and continually refine itself. It's, yeah, like I said, we're just discovered this like 2 weeks ago. So I can say it's.
Yeah, I've been building this stuff for multiple years, and MarketMuse, our engineering team and things. So it's just fun to hear you talk about it in this way. It's so like being, now you can integrate your ChatGPT API, your platform API from OpenAI, and we are also beginning to integrate our generation platform back into our solution in some creative ways to do some more instruction-based, not prompt-based, but instruction-based workflows. So it's just exciting to hear you talk about these use cases because they're all active. And you can do what typically would have been. I always like to say, for someone of your acumen, it's not like it was saving you 40 hours of work because you probably wouldn't have done it manually. Right?
Yeah, totally.
We're in that zone where we're doing something we wouldn't have done before because it's reasonably impossible. It's not that it was impossible to do manually. So I'm finding the most exciting thing, and I'm interested in your take on this, is I'm doing things I would have put off because the lift would have been so big, and I'm doing them in superhuman time. And I have been for, now about a year, where I can do the job of, 50 humans trained on instructions, but I would have never done those projects, and that's the thing. It's one of these things, like I would have never sourced that or So it's not like it's like people not doing work. It's just work that would have never gotten done. But when you start to get and become that, become that superhuman person, you start to do more. I mean, my head of content strategy, Steven Jeske, and I are talking about this, and it's just like, here, this is what would have taken me 60 hours to do. I wouldn't have done it. I mean, and I wouldn't have resourced it. Isn't that the change that people aren't really talking about?
Yeah, totally. I've not actually heard anybody. They talk about, oh, it's going to eliminate things, but you're actually saying it's creating new opportunities, which that is everybody's counterpoint to. It's going to eliminate jobs and then it's going to create new ones. And so that's a good point. Yeah, we would not have done this work before. We just we had the expertise, right? We didn't have to do it. Like we could distill something down pretty interesting. But now we're able to just take our insights and then be like, oh, well, what if we iterate on it 25 times?
You're like, you should be on the cover of the thread. Like, hey, no, actually, we wouldn't have this, this mid-size agency wouldn't have executed on these things. So to me, it's the dream. It's the dream of, natural language generation, original implementation. It's like, no, we wouldn't have covered all the sports. We wouldn't have covered all the games in that league. We would only pick a few, or we wouldn't have covered all the elections. We wouldn't have covered all the games at the Olympics. Now we're able to cover them all. Like now it's, oh, well, we wouldn't have done sentiment analysis on all of our transcripts, So it's almost like things that wouldn't have happened but now they are happening. It's really, really cool. Cool. So I'm starting to get some questions in, but I did want to touch a little bit on what are some little misconceptions of category creation, misconceptions of Lyft, and I would start with people who think that it's just too hard. Would be one. It's not for me because our company's too small. So that would be one. But do you have any others that I'd love to get into?
Yeah, and on the hard one, it is really hard. And if you don't have a buy-in from the very top of the company, I would say don't even try. I mean, you can go ahead and remove the comparison and try to do what you can, but you will not be able to create a movement unless the founder or CEO is leading it. So just to set everybody's expectation, it is hard, and one of the number one things that fails is you don't have buy-in from the top. So just leave that at that. But the misconceptions are, the number one is it's going to be expensive, and where are we going to get demand? So I think we said, probably have kept this to the end, but we called this webinar Hijack Demand with Content Differentiation. So you're going to go ahead and get the demand where you've been getting it from. And then when you bring them into the pipe, however it is, whether it's self-serve or they're booking a demo, you're going to lead them to this path of something they didn't know about. So you're going to have framed up the world and the problem they want solved in a way that other people aren't. And so they're like, oh, I needed an email marketing provider. These guys are selling me this other thing that does everything I need plus. I didn't even know I could do. I didn't know it was possible. And so you're no longer compared to the other people they were considering. You're in this different category. And that's where the word category comes in. You have created a new point of view, but you're still 100% in that consideration set with the rest of the email service providers. If we stay in that existing category. In Klaviyo, just to go back and point out people doing it without doing this work. So they hit right place, right time, nailed the Shopify ecosystem. They're going to go public. It sounds like at about $10 billion valuation. They do comparative messaging. They just have sold better email. So it's kind of an old way, new way. Like the old way was bad, but they didn't really do anything other than sell better email. So there's lots that they could have done. They totally revolutionized how customer communications happen in e-commerce. They brought marketing automation to B2C. Marketing automation was not a thing. That was a B2B thing. So yeah. So just to point out that other people do it differently, but those are far and few between.
You don't have to do category creation. It is a path to differentiation. It's a path to potentially chop down some trees, as they say, right? Where you got somebody who's real big, you can get around them and try to take some of market share. But that's actually a question Alan just sent me. via DM. He said, "Is this a way to beat tougher competitors or stalwarts in a market?" You know, and he works for a B2B tech company who is, I'd probably say, 5 to 8% of market share, and they have a 30% beast in B2B tech. So that would be he's always looking to beat up on that big gorilla.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to compete with them is to be different than them, right? And so wherever they're getting their demand, get right in there, and get out there with whatever your point of view is that questions those people's reality, and bring them on over and have that conversation with you. There is another way to do this. It's how we do it. And regardless of actually how it happens is exactly the same. Don't worry about that. It's how you tell that story. It's how you position it. And that is the best way to go punch up the market, is just get in there and advertise right next to them with a message that's questioning the reality of what they're selling. So you still run your business on an email service provider, right? Like Klaviyo could have gone and done that to MailChimp all day long, or Salesforce, or whoever else was selling ESPs. So
stop copying your competitors' content as your sole content strategy.
Yeah. No, question people's reality.
See what I did right there? That's literally our exhibition of the tactic that you did, because all the other providers in our space tell you how to copy your competitors, and that's not good enough. No. So yes, what you just described, I mean, that, and to Alan, that's the play, because I know the business. I won't dox who he's talking about, but it's about the reality of what that big player does is that it's passe. And you want to communicate that big player is passe. Something about that, in our space, it's stop thinking about SEO as tracking keywords in a database, right? Most big providers, all it is basically a database, and you track your keywords in it, and you watch them go up and down, and that's the extent of working with them. The other would be copying your competitors, right? So tracking your keywords in a database and copying your competitors are the two realities I don't want you to be in. But every single mid-market to enterprise SEO team or content team, that's the extent of their world. You want something different, right? You want something delivering, strategic value, strategic finance. No, I'm just kidding. That was your callback.
But you could, but that question, the reality works, right? Everybody's tracking their keyword results. But are you still just tracking your keyword results?
Yep.
You think that works in 2023?
Carl, great feedback. He just wrote, "Just do it." He's calling out some awesome some philosophy from customer storytelling, keeping it simple. Discovering the need, meet the need, brief histories of storytelling. Your guys are walking through the basics, and he's given us great feedback. But this has been such a fun conversation. It really dives into ways that you can differentiate, gets into specifics. I'm gonna finally ask one more question: is any hiccups that Dustin has run into? It sounds like he's in the earlier stage of AI adoption from a natural language processing perspective that we can learn from. And then, I'll highlight a few things and plugs on your podcast, and we'll call it a day. Great question, by the way, Sam, from a B2B SaaS company. Just asked, he said, hiccups that he's run into adopting AI for their agency.
Oh man, the main hiccup is the rate of change. I mean, we're just trying to figure out where should we, not use it. Honestly, is the question we need to ask. We're not asking where should we use it. I think the question is, where should we not use it? And so, and again, we have to get out of our old way. We have done all this work by hand. And so we need to figure out how do we use the machine to make it better. And so it's just us getting out of our own skin and comfort and realizing this is the new way. It's not, it's not going away. This is here. We need to embrace it. The schools are having the same thing, right? They're trying to ban it from schools. It's no, you need to teach these kids how to use it immediately.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that,
So
and the advice I've given has been similar. It's you got to do a frank process inventory. You got to walk through every, from I woke up, I got out of bed, I brushed my teeth all the way through to got into bed and closed my eyes. I mean, obviously in a business sense, but you got to maybe have somebody else even be over your shoulder, seeing everything you're doing manually, everything you think you've got a plan on, because if you don't become AI emergent, you're going to become obsolete very, very quickly. I mean, it's
yeah,
just
so
rapid.
that's I think the biggest headwind for us is just, yeah, we actually need to flip the question to be like, where should we not use it? And we're currently asking, where should we use it? So just that mindset flip, yeah, we're in shock, I guess.
It's so disruptive. The disruption wave is coming. And I just did a presentation at an event, which was the wave of disruption from large language models and all the impacts on every business. You could take an entire category, lay out the market maturity, and just how will LLM wave over it? Will it even be left, or will everybody there be dead? I mean, and that's basically a process that is valuable to do, and sounds like it's going to be an interesting part of positioning as well, in my opinion. Go
Yeah.
check out MarketMuse if you haven't already. Book a demo, book-demo, shoot me a note, jeff@marketmuse.com, or on Twitter, Jeffrey_Coyle, or LinkedIn at Jeff Coyle. Go check out everything that is connected to Dustin. DRMG, it is, correct? Or is it DMR?
DRMG.co.
I've got that backwards on this slide, but I caught it. DRMG, Dustin DR SaaS Brand Strategy Show. Such a good show, even though I missed the last episode. Go check that out for sure. What other things would you want to point people towards?
LinkedIn. We're pretty active on LinkedIn, so it's Dustin DR on LinkedIn. Got a bunch of good content there. And yeah, if you need reading glasses, check out caddislife.com. Caddis is the name of the company.
Cool. And other than Fugazi and Sex Pistols, what other punk bands would be on your playlist?
Oh, I'm a kid of the 80s, so Dead Kennedys was another big one.
Okay.
Yeah, the Butthole Surfers.
Butthole Surfers. All right, solid. Well, yeah, go check those out if you're into that. Yeah, as I typically, if people got music on the wall or guitars on the wall, we'll typically get into that. But Dustin, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks for joining us, spending some time here, getting into the details about something that I know we both really, really love. And if you want to reach out to them on branding, positioning, those are things that they really, really know. Getting into specifically SaaS category creation, how to differentiate, no matter what stage you're at. Dustin and his team are just like the rock stars of our space. So go check them out. All right. Thanks again, Dustin.
Thank you.